The Chazal established that we always read Parshas Bamidbor before Shavuos, which obviously tells us that this Parsha has a special connection to the Hachana, to the preparation before Matan Torah. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe is going to connect it specifically with the Kviyas of that year of the Sikha, when Shabbos Bamidbor was Beis Sivan. What is Beis Sivan? So the Rebbe brings what the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch, that the minhag is that we don't say Tachlin from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until Ches Sivan. That's the minhag that the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch. Because you first of all have Rosh Chodesh, of course, but right after Rosh Chodesh, Moshe Rabbeinu starts getting involved with the Yidden, preparing them for receiving the Torah. So Rosh Chodesh that year was on a Monday, on the second day of the week. The following day, which is Beis Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Yidden, from Hashem of course, that V'atem tiyuli mamleches koyanim, you are going to be for me a kingdom of koyanim, which we'll see later what this word koyanim means. And the Alter Rebbe says v'goymer. The Rebbe has a few questions on the words of the Alter Rebbe. Number one, there are things that are said over there in those psukim before v'atem tiyuli mamleches koyanim. For example, it speaks about all the things that Hashem did for the Yidden, the miracles that Hashem did for the Yidden. And then the pasuk of v'hiyisem li sgula, you're going to be my treasured nation. So why doesn't the Alter Rebbe start with those things? Number two, the meaning of Mamleches Koyanim. The Ramban explains the word Koyanim as Meshorsim, you're going to be my servants. That's what a Koyan is. Rashi, on the other hand, translates Mamleches Koyanim as Sorim. Sorim is ministers, nobles. So the Rebbe says, if we go according to the Ramban, we can understand how this is part of the preparation for Matan Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu getting the Yidden prepared for Matan Torah. They're going to need to be serving Hashem. Mamleches Koyanim, you're going to be my servants through Torah and mitzvahs. But according to Rashi's explanation, when the word Koyanim means you're going to be my ministers, my officers, my nobles, how is this connected with their preparation for Matan Torah? Another thing that Rebbe says we need to understand is, why is it that the Alter Rebbe, as we said, after V'atem Tiyuli Mamleches Koyanim, it says V'goy Kadosh. On the one hand, the Alter Rebbe does say V'goymer, which he is referring to the next part in the pasuk V'goy Kadosh, but he doesn't actually specifically say the words V'goy Kadosh. In order to understand this, says the Rebbe, we're first going to try to understand Rashi. Why, in fact, does Rashi explain Koyanim over here, Mamleches Koyanim, as Sorim? Rashi himself says earlier on in Chumash that usually the word Koyain means a Meshorei Slelikus, a servant of Hashem. So why over here is Rashi saying Koyan means a Sar? And the Rebbe says, if the word Koyanim over here would be a servant to Hashem, then the words V'goy Kodesh seemingly wouldn't be adding anything. A Koyan to Hashem already means that this person is a holy person, separated from the world, he's serving Hashem. So what would the words V'goy Kodesh mean? And therefore Rashi says, Mamleches Koyanim first of all means you'll be my special nobles, officers, princes. Then V'goy Kodesh. So in other words, according to Rashi we have over here that there's three levels that these psukim are speaking about. Number one, amim. That is, that the Yidden are the chosen from amongst all the other nations. Number two, Sorim, like ministers that are actually running the country and in control over the rest of the nations and the world. And finally, V'goy Kodesh is even a higher level where they're completely removed from the whole world, completely designated and holy for Hashem. Says the Rebbe B'pnimi, what are these three ideas? The concept of V'yisem li Sgula is because Hashem chose us from all the other nations. In other words, there is other nations. Seemingly, you might say on this level, there's nothing noticeable different between the Yidden and Lahavdil the Goyim, and yet the Eibishter is saying, I'm going to choose you from amongst all the other nations. Then starts the concept of Avodah. What are we going to be doing? And here we have two levels. One is the level Mamleches Koyanim. The Koyanim, as we said before, are the ministers that are running and controlling all the other matters of the country, and in this case, the Yidden controlling all the matters of the world. This would be the Avodah. In Avodas Hashem, this would be the concept of Kol Ma'asecha L'Shem Shamayim U'B'chol Drachecha Da'eu, when we're getting involved with worldly things and dealing with them. Then there's the Avodah of Torah and mitzvahs, where we're completely removed from the world and just connected and cleaving to Hashem Himself. In truth, says the Rebbe, even within Torah and mitzvahs, we could also see these two levels. We could have a level of limud Torah, learning Torah, just to cleave to Hashem, just to be connected to Hashem. That's more the idea of a goy kadosh. You have the idea of Torah and mitzvahs in order to make the world a place for Hashem, changing the world, making it a dira b'tachtoinim. That's more like the mamleches koyanim aspect, where we're like sorim, like the officers that are in charge of the world itself and changing the world itself. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand on a deeper level why Rashi says mamleches koyanim is specifically the idea of sorim, officers, rather than, like the Ramban says, meshorsei Hashem, serving Hashem, which is the idea of Torah and mitzvahs and kedusha, etc. How is that? We know the famous Gemara that speaks about that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, the Malachim went to the Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu goes through the various different dibros, showing them that the whole point of Torah is not for a malach somewhere up in heaven who doesn't have to do with the Gashmiistic world. Rather, the whole point of Torah is in a place where there's a Yetzer Hara, and there's work, and there's business. So we're involved in the world, and yet we're transforming the world itself. We need to elevate the world. In fact, says the Rebbe, this is also the difference between, as we know, the Avos before Matan Torah and Matan Torah. The Avos were a complete merkava telikus, completely bottled, completely nullified to Hashem, removed from the world. That's in fact also why they're shepherds, removed from worldly things. But the main chidush of Matan Torah is about coming down into the world and elevating the world. This is why Rashi translates Mamleches Koyanim Esarim, meaning the beginning of the things that are going to be an avodah for the Yidden in connection to Matan Torah is going to be about elevating the world, because that's the point of Matan Torah. Then we come also to a level of Goy Kadosh, being completely removed, completely holy, etc. This is also why the Alter Rebbe, back to the Alter Rebbe, when he's speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu starting to work with the Yidden, preparing them for Matan Torah, number one is Mamleches Koyanim. This is the focus of Matan Torah, how we're going to change the world. The Alter Rebbe refers to and hints to V'goy Kodesh by saying V'goymer, because of course there's then another and higher level where a Yid becomes completely miyuchad and one with Hashem. Says the Rebbe, we can now connect all of this back to Parshas Bamidbor, which I said before, we always read it before and as a preparation to Matan Torah. In Parshas Bamidbor we have the count of the Yidden 3 times. Number 1, we have the count of all of the Yidden in the beginning of the Parsha. Later we have Shevet Levi being counted separately. And finally, at the end of the Parsha, we have within Shevet Levi, the family of Kahas being counted separately from Shevet Levi itself. And then the next Parsha continues with the other parts of Shevet Levi as well. Says the Rebbe, these 3 counts are similar to the 3 ideas of Vehiyisam Lisgula and Mamleches Koyanim and Goy Kadosh. How is that? The concept of counting something, we know Dover Shebeminyan is not bottle. Something that's counted does not become nullified. But it's not because you could see there's something unique and special on its own in this thing itself. It's the counting that's telling us there must be something very special about it, that's why it's not going to be nullified. In our case, this is the idea that Hashem chooses the Yidden from amongst all the nations, where Bechitzoyni, on the external level, we don't necessarily see the difference, but Hashem counts the Yidden, and that itself gives them their specialty. This is like the idea of a Yisem Lisgula, where Hashem says, you're my treasured nation from amongst all the nations. Then comes the next level, which is the counting of Shevet Levi. And as we said, this is going to correspond to the idea of what's Shevet Levi. Rashi tells us regarding Shevet Levi that they're appointed in a special way, that you should count them in a way of Minu Yusarara. They're appointed, they're in charge of the things of the Beis HaMikdash. Lishmar Mishmeres HaKodesh. This is like the idea of Mamleches Koyanim, where they are sorim, controlling and taking care of the world in a way that they're changing the world. Finally, there's within Shevet Levi itself, we said there's a special count at the end of Bnei Kahas. This is already referring to very special work in the Oyel Moed, carrying the things of the holiest items, etc., etc. This is already like the next level up, which is the concept of a Goy Kodesh. Says the Rebbe, just like we explained before, that the main preparation for Matan Torah is the Mamleches Koyanim element, the Sorim element. So too, when we look in Parshas Bamidbor, what's the Chiddush of Parshas Bamidbor? Is specifically the count, the middle count of all the Leviim, which we said corresponds to Mamleches Koyanim. Why is that the main idea of Parshas Bamidbor, the main Chiddush of Parshas Bamidbor? Because the first count of Bnei Yisrael, this we had already a number of times earlier in Chumash. The count of Bnei Kahas at the end of the Parsha, this is the beginning of individual families of Shevet Levi being counted, which is going to continue into Parshas Nosai. So if you want to say what's the unique thing for Parshas Bamidbor, that is the middle count, the count of all of the Leviim together, which we said that's the concept of being Sorim, being appointed over the things in the Mishkan, similar to the idea of the Mamleches Koyanim being Sorim. And similar to this idea that the Yidden take control over the world. Says the Rebbe, by acting in this way, preparing ourselves in this way for Kabbalas HaTorah b'simcha v'pnimiyus, we're zoichet to learn the Torah of Mashiach when immediately Mashiach will come and v'hoisel Hashem hamlucha.